regarding fat loss, maybe 10%, right? Fasted cardio, let's say 10% more fat loss, an arbitrary number that I'm pulling out of based on my 20 years of experience on myself and 10 years of coaching experience with clients. Vigorous Steve here with my final thoughts on HGH-Frag 176-191. We're also going to discuss anti-obesity drug 9604, which I also experimented with in between trials of HGH-Frag. And we're going to compare all of that to the lipolytic effects of growth hormone, which I have extensive experience with, both pharmaceutical grade and Chinese generics. I've basically tried it all regarding these peptides. So we're going to discuss all of that in this video. We're going to make head-on-head comparisons between HGH-Frag, anti-obesity drug, and growth hormone pharmaceutical grade, which I have the most experience with, and then see which one of these compounds provides the most fat loss, which, spoiler alert, it's going to be growth hormone. But let's dive in a little bit deeper. So the most, during this trial that I was experimenting with HGH-Frag of about 3 to 4 months, I mixed in a vial of anti-obesity drug here and there to see if there would be a difference regarding fat loss in the fat loss trajectory that I was getting from these peptides, right? I discontinued exogenous growth hormone maybe 6 months ago, so there's no overlap there. So we're purely going to compare my anecdotal evidence of comparing exogenous growth hormone to HGH-Frag mixed in with the AOD-9604 here and there, and see how much of a lipolytic effect we can get from these peptides compared to GH. Now, HGH-Frag is the last 16 amino acids of growth hormone said to contain its lipolytic properties. So growth hormone, as we all know, produces a little bit of lipolysis from the fat cells, resulting in overall fat loss, right? The fat still needs to get burned somewhere through activity. So ideally, you take your growth hormone or your HGH-Frag or your AOD before activity, allowing this freshly liberated triglycerides that are entering the bloodstream to be burned off as energy, assuming that you have sufficient carnitine in place to transport this triglycerides, whether that's short, medium, or long, into the mitochondria to produce ATP and energy, right, and expend them that way. So assuming that's all in place, these last 16 amino acids of growth hormone are said to be the sequence inducing lipolysis. So there's 2 peptides out there that only contain the last 16 amino acids of growth hormone. One of them is HGH-Frag 176-191, right, representing the last 6 amino acids of the 191 amino acids that growth hormone contains. And then there's anti-obesity drug 9604, which replaces one of these 16 amino acids with tyrosine, extending its active life. And well, the anti-aging and peptide community says that anti-obesity drug is, due to its modification, more potent. I did not notice any significant change between dosing 250 micrograms HGH-Frag to the next day 250 micrograms anti-obesity drug. I got fat loss in both scenarios. Both of these compounds did not affect my blood work parameters, so I would... Right, over the last couple of blood work results, you guys have been actively following along as I post my blood work publicly online. Every time I would go in for blood work, about 30 minutes before I go, right, before I draw blood, I would inject either HGH-Frag or anti-obesity drug to see if they would have an altering effect on my blood work. Because when I inject growth hormone 30 minutes before I draw blood, even 1.2 units, 2 units, 4 units, right, as the dosages of growth hormone increase, so do I see an increase in blood glucose concentrations and serum triglyceride concentrations. And 250 micrograms of HGH-Frag or AOD does not change my serum triglycerides or blood glucose levels. Now, this is known that it doesn't change your blood glucose parameters because this little fragment of growth hormone, the last 16 amino acids, doesn't increase or doesn't promote IGF-1 secretion from the liver. It doesn't change glucose concentrations, and it doesn't have any of the benefits associated with growth hormone, including its cell proliferating effects, only its lipolytic effects. Now, I would expect at least to see an increase in serum triglycerides, which did not occur on my blood work injecting HGH-Frag or AOD 30 minutes before drawing blood. So there was a little bit of a red flag for me. I still got additional fat loss, I would say, on top of everything else that I was doing, right? The cardio and the reducing of calories and experimenting with the roloxifene and 5-amino-1-MQ, which in my opinion was more beneficial for my fat loss journey over the HGH-Frag or the AOD. Still, both compounds facilitated some additional fat loss. So I would say that the experiment was a success, albeit that, right, maybe not to the extent that I would expect from these compounds. So over the last 3 or 4 months, the protocol has been as follows. I administered either 250 micrograms HGH-Frag 176-191 or anti-obesity drug 9604, 1 hour before fasted cardio or 1 hour before the workout. So that's 7 administrations per week pre-cardio, because I do 30 minutes of fasted cardio every morning. And then 4 or 5 workouts somewhere later in the day. So sometimes I would do my workout in the morning, in which case I would probably not do cardio in the evening. I would either do post-workout cardio or skip it. A little bit busy sometimes in the morning. And I don't really like to do evening cardio, so I'll be the first one to admit it. I did not do cardio every day unless I was training in the evening, right? So at least on my rest days, I would do cardio and still administer 250 micrograms HGH-Frag or AOD prior, right? Now, what I've noticed is that this dosing protocol doesn't really work. Ideally, I found that it works better just to administer the HGH-Frag or AOD right before I go to the gym. So let's say 10 minutes before getting started. I would say that these compounds have a very short acting effect, even though the peptide community says that this tyrosine modification of AOD in 9604 over HGH-Frag extends its active life and makes it more potent, which I certainly don't think is the case from my own personal experience and some of the clients that were able to compare both compounds through their personal experience in the past or join me in this experiment. So I would say that they're pretty much interchangeable regarding the results, but instead of dosing these compounds an hour before or 30 minutes before, I found it's better just to dose them and then go to the gym, because it's a lipolytic effect seemed to be quite short-lived between both compounds. And I felt that it was better for my overall fat loss journey that way. Now, keep in mind that when I would do cardio, right, I would inject it like right before and then get started. And then if I were to go to the gym, there's about 5 to 10 minutes before I actually start my workout. And I was walking in between sets, and that stimulates a lot of fat loss as well. So you have these compounds, whether that's the growth hormone, the HGH-Frag or the AOD, releasing a little bit of fat from adipose tissue into the bloodstream, allowing it to be burned off through activity. And then you have this workout in place, right, with walking in between sets, allowing you to continuously expend energy. So instead of, right, you do your strenuous set to failure and perhaps beyond, and then you sit in your butt scrolling Instagram and checking the news and whatever else, right, reducing your metabolic rate to like the minimum needed for your thumb to move on your mobile phone. Instead of that, for the last 4 months, I've been walking. Every time I'm in between sets, I walk. I don't rest, I walk. I think that gave me a lot of fat loss regardless of these compounds, but I certainly felt that these compounds were helping in this scenario. So besides the fasted cardio being optimized with, regarding fat loss, maybe 10%, right? Fasted cardio, let's say 10% more fat loss, an arbitrary number that I'm pulling out of my ass based on my 20 years of experience on myself and 10 years of coaching experience with clients. 10% benefit, I would say. But during this walking in between sets, right, instead of doing your post-workout cardio, you're walking between sets, I would say that the fat loss was so substantial that I could feel the fat going away the next day. Now, if I were to walk in between sets and still use the HGH-Frag or AOD, right, sometimes it's a little bit tired, let's say on a Friday, for example, where I start to get a little bit fatigued because the carb load is coming on Sunday. And instead of walking in between my sets, I would just sit on my butt, do nothing and rest. Then the next day, I would notice that there was barely any significant fat loss. Now, mostly when you do a cutting phase and you're trying to diet and lose body fat, you don't notice a significant change from day to day. But what I've noticed, right, disregarding the 5-amino-1-MQ, this was already occurring before I introduced the 5-amino-1-MQ in that experiment, which I posted a couple days ago. So watch that if you haven't watched it already. That significantly sped it up with walking in between sets. But I felt that the HGH-Frag or AOD, in this scenario where you train in the morning, you do your workout, you walk in between sets, the next day I would feel physically leaner, judging by my lower back, my abs, a little bit of my glutes. I just pinch those areas and just make a little bit of an anecdotal assessment. I would feel leaner than compared to not walking in between sets. And if I were to walk in between sets and not use the HGH-Frag or AOD, I would also not feel leaner. So in that sense, I feel that an ideal protocol for these compounds is to administer them right before going to the gym, walk in between sets, and then do that for the duration of your cutting phase or contest prep. So it's a little bit more extra activity. You might still need to do cardio, but at least the fat loss is quite significant. Now you throw the 5-amino-1-MQ on top. Yeah, that's daily progress. Daily progress that doesn't seem to stagnate. So in that sense, from all the fat burners that I've experimented with, I would rate the 5-amino-1-MQ 5-star compounds. In the HGH-Frag and the AOD, maybe a 2.5-star, 3-star compound. Again, I did not notice a difference between both compounds. Maybe you would get a better effect with AOD over the HGH-Frag, right? Just anecdotal evidence and what I've observed in my immediate surroundings. Now, what is of note, comparing HGH-Frag to growth hormone, is that this 16 amino acid sequence of growth hormone is 8.13% of the molecular weight, right, of the most abundant growth hormone variety that your body produces. We apparently produce 5 varieties, right? You have the 20 kilodalton, the 22 kilodalton molecular weight, and a variant of that, and then the 23 to 24 kilodalton molecular weight, which seems to be present in post-exercise states. But Leo from Leo and Longevity also mentioned that it's present in spinal fluids, where you can find these 5 different isoforms of growth hormone. But the most abundant isoform of growth hormone weighs 22,124 daltons, and HGH-Frag is only 1,799.0811 daltons, which is 8.13% of the molecular weight of the most common isoform of growth hormone that your body secretes, or you get in pharmaceutical in the form of a pharmaceutical grade GH or a Chinese generic, also being this isoform of 22,124 daltons, right? So that's the most common version, and HGH-Frag weighs approximately 8.13%. Now, if you were to do some dubious extrapolation and calculation, right, assuming that 1 IU of growth hormone is actually 330 micrograms, so 1 international unit of growth hormone being 22 kilodaltons is 330 micrograms. When you're injecting 250 micrograms of HGH-Frag, that equals the same amount of sequences of these 16 amino acids comparing to the full amino acid sequence of 191 amino acids contained within the growth hormone. 250 micrograms HGH-Frag would equal the same amount of sequences contained within 3,074.35 micrograms of growth hormone. Right? It's only 8.13%, so it's 3,074 micrograms of growth hormone. Now, if you were to calculate that back to the international units, 3,074 micrograms of growth hormone equals 9.32 units. 9.32 units. So this exact same amount of sequences of these 16 amino acids on 250 micrograms HGH-Frag is the same as 9.32 IU's growth hormone. Now, do you get the same amount of lipolysis and overall fat loss comparing both dosages? Absolutely fucking not. Absolutely not. Not even close. Right? Of course, on 9.32 IU's growth hormone, you would get all kinds of anabolic benefits, right? And perhaps a full-blown insulin resistance to the point you turn yourself diabetic over time. It certainly needs a little bit of a warning, dosing 9 units of growth hormone. I've gone up as high as 8 units of growth hormone, right? At various protocols of either 2 IUs spaced out over 4 injections, or a single administration of 8 IUs pre-workout or post-workout, or doubling the dose but using it half of the time. So an every other day approach of 16 IUs. Yeah, I've experimented with all that stuff. And the long story short, the amount of fat loss you get from those kind of protocols is substantial, really substantial. If you're assuming you're in a caloric deficit and you do the activity to mitigate some of this insulin resistance, which occurs acutely after administration of 8 to 16 units daily or every other day. So it's quite a substantial injection. You can definitely see that in your blood glucose levels. But the fat loss you get in that scenario from these high dosages of growth hormone is, daily progress, I would say. But from 250 micrograms of HGH-Frag, and even if you're walking in between sets, and even if you're using 5-amino-1-MQ and whatever other fat burner on top, it's definitely not comparable, right? So I would say, from my own personal and anecdotal experience with the HGH-Frag and the AOD, I would say that 250 micrograms of either or is equal to about 1.2 IUs of growth hormone. So what I would do previously, purely from a fat loss perspective, and to mitigate some of these insulin resistance, which occurs after a growth hormone injection because it releases so much free-form fatty acids in the bloodstream, right? It's lipolytic effect, dumping adipose tissue in the form of triglycerides and free-form fatty acids into the bloodstream, inhibiting insulin receptor substrate 1 and preventing insulin from doing its job at the receptor site. Long story short, insulin resistance. When I was administering 1 to 2 units of growth hormone before fasted cardio or before the workout later in the day, or a workout early in the morning, but I would still have a little bit of a protein shake because, working out in the morning, you need a little bit of energy to keep you going. In those scenarios, I would notice fat loss, right? From 1 unit of growth hormone, I would say similar fat loss to 250 micrograms HGH-Frag or AOD. But beyond 2 units of growth hormone in a single administration, I would notice more fat loss. Now I've increased the dose to 500 micrograms HGH-Frag or AOD before fasted cardio or before the workouts. And I did not notice a significant increase in fat loss. So you see some of the protocols online where they say you need 500 micrograms HGH-Frag or AOD to notice a significant effect. But I already got a good effect from 250 micrograms, and bumping the dose up, doubling the dose, did not potentiate any additional fat loss. So, and again, on my blood work, I did not really see any changes in serum triglycerides or blood glucose levels, especially comparing 1 to 2 units of growth hormone in a similar testing parameters. So I would say that the effective dose is 250 micrograms HGH-Frag, or AOD, which is very comparable to 1 IU growth hormone. And I will say that while fasting, I feel that 250 micrograms maybe 4 times per day does yield a more potent effect. So I'm not exactly sure if that's due to fasting, where you're already releasing a decent amount of fat into the bloodstream and to keep your ketones going and stay cognitive because you're, not eating any food. So when I was fasting and dosing 250 micrograms HGH-Frag, I would get a substantial amount of fat loss, which was probably more significant over 250 micrograms administrations before fasted cardio and before the workouts, or dosing 500 micrograms twice per day before fasted cardio or before the workouts. In both cases, it's 1,000 micrograms HGH-Frag or anti-obesity drug. While fasting, again, you're not eating any food. The fat loss is more substantial. And in that case, I would compare it to almost 2 units of growth hormone. Again, the fat loss on 2 units of growth hormone while fasting is also more substantial than 2 units or 4 units before fasted cardio or before the workout. So in the context of fasting, it works a little bit better, but the same can be said for growth hormone because, no calories in and all the calories are going out. So my final verdict about the compounds is that it works. I feel that the effective dose is 250 micrograms administered directly before activity. The fat loss that you can expect, which what I was getting and my clients were getting, is about comparable to 1 unit of growth hormone. The benefit of dosing 250 micrograms HGH-Frag or anti-obesity drug twice per day over 1 unit of growth hormone twice per day, so a total of 500 micrograms versus 2 IU's growth hormone is that you don't get this additional water retention that you get from growth hormone. And at the same time, you're missing out on this IGF-1 increase and the improved sleep quality. I did not have any of the day lethargy that you would get from a dose of 2 units of growth hormone administered at any point during the day. So that would make me feel a little bit sleepy. And that's not something I experienced with HGH-Frag or AOD. So that's a benefit, right? So no water retention and no lethargy during the day. But again, you're missing out on the IGF-1, the sleep quality, the nail growth, the hair growth, the recovery, which comes from growth hormone, the fullness, which comes from growth hormone. I didn't feel significantly fuller running either of these 2 peptides. So I would say if you can afford it and you're not only after fat loss, growth hormone is superior. But if you're solely after fat loss and you don't care about this increased anti-aging from a cosmetic perspective, even though elevated levels of IGF-1 is a little bit counterproductive and counterintuitive when it comes to anti-aging, because that also increases cell proliferation, right? And that's something you don't want if you care about anti-aging. So with growth hormone, the anti-aging effects are purely cosmetic. It makes you look a little bit more youthful, perhaps fill in a little bit of the wrinkles due to its increase in potential for water retention. And it gives you a little bit of a youthful appearance and improves your hair texture to a certain extent. So purely cosmetic benefits of growth hormone when it comes to anti-aging, something you won't notice on HGH-Frag. But reduction of water retention, if that's what you're after, and that was what I was after when I reintroduced the performance enhancing drugs again, because I wanted to maintain a youthful appearance. I mean, if I go on growth hormone, 2 units, I get a little bit of a moon face. So I made a video about this Benjamin Button stack, which I mentioned a while ago. You can watch it here, where I mentioned my preference to experiment with HGH-Frag over GH going forward, just to get its lipolytic properties, which they certainly have, albeit not to the same extent as growth hormone. And so in that case, if you want to keep a youthful appearance and you don't want to suffer from this lethargy, then HGH-Frag or AOD wins. So it really depends on what you want, right? Both compounds are known to improve lipolysis and contribute to fat loss overall, assuming that the cardio and the caloric restrictions and the activity levels are all maintained and you're in a micronutrient surplus to keep all the metabolic processes and all the other processes of the body going, right? Caloric deficit, micronutrient surplus. In both cases, they have their benefits, but if you want a little bit more out of your performance enhancing drug journey, I would say the growth hormone is hands down worth the price. And if you just care about the fat loss and you want to still look streamlined while staying productive, then I would say HGH-Frag or anti-obesity drug wins. I think that pretty much covers it. I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find the ebooks on my website, vigoroussteve.com/shop. Personalized advice always available through consultations. You can find the rates in the consultation section. Follow me on Instagram at VigorSteve. Lipolytic front double bicep. The size is there due to the growth hormone, which was used extensively in the past. And this, we're not going to use the phallic remarks, but this super thin skin, or as of recent, HGH-Frag and AOD-9604 with a little bit of a cherry on top in the form of 5-amino 1MQ, right? I'm always transparent about what I used. I'm sure it contributed. Still, I feel like I got good results from HGH-Frag and anti-obesity drug for that matter. It's worth it. And I might continue to use it in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.